Welcome to This Week in Money. I'm Jim Goddard. Today, Casey research energy expert Marin Katusa on the glow surrounding uranium. Tim Cyclesman Wood is nervous with the markets at record highs. Timing the real estate market author Robert Campbell says downsizing could be the key to retirement. We'll talk to Marin Katusa right after this.
Blue Christmas, the king of tributes, Randy Elvis Frisky and his spectacular show band, Christmas classics, rock and holiday favorites, and the gospel music of Elvis Presley. Saturday, December 7th, Abbotsford Pentecostal Assembly. Tickets at ontourtickets.com. Welcome to This Week in Money, the source for market opinions. Sitting in for Phil Mackesy, here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Marin Katusa, oil and gas analyst at KC Research. Welcome to the show, Marin.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
You're saying the big glow right now is uranium. Why?
Well, it is. We've been talking about this for a while, how the HEU agreement has now officially shipped its last uranium shipment from Russia to the U.S. last Tuesday. So that's it. And since then, the spot price of uranium has picked up. And ironically, the Kazakh government came out and stated that we are not advancing any further projects and we have to decline production because in the mid-30s we can't make money producing uranium. Now, what investors have to understand is Kazakhstan has, the assets that the Russians, when Kazakhstan used to be part of the USSR, the Russians drilled that all out, and it was the major producing uranium areas because it's all ISR. Very similar to what's in Texas. Very, very similar geology to what's in Texas for the ISR uranium. And the Russians came out and said, we're also going to pull back on production because we can't make money. Cigar Lake, which is owned by Cameco, they just came out and said, we're going to delay production because at $35 doesn't really make sense. A bunch of U.S. producers said the same thing, and in Africa, the producers have also said the same thing. And you can see in the market how some of these stocks are now really starting to pick up. On top of all this, Goldman Sachs today announced that they have to get out of the commodity trading business and are selling their uranium trading arm. Why is that important? Well, the Volcker rule comes in where banks are not allowed to have trading arms, so the manipulation of commodities now is going to start ending. And the demand, the price of the long-term contracts for uranium now is about 35 to 40% higher, and it's picking up, basically showing that there's huge life in uranium here, and it looks like we've bottomed out. Now, if another nuclear meltdown happens somewhere, sure, you can see more, the darkness in the sector, but with China going full steam ahead, Saudi Arabia, the Middle East building nukes, even the U.S., 1 in every 5 homes is lit by nuclear energy. There's going to be demand, and it's increasing for uranium, and especially UF6, uranium hexafluoride. So it's a great story, and we think that this is just the beginning of the next leg of the uranium bull market.
Is Japan ever going to build reactors again?
Well, I don't think they have to build new reactors. They just all have to do is, make the modifications and bring back their existing nukes. Now, they have 55 nuclear reactors. They're a major consumer of uranium now. With what happened with Fukushima, it's just natural that the country would be cautious. And look, the Fukushima thing has been completely, TEPCO's really screwed up how they've been trying to fix those problems. There's been water leakage. And the reality is it hasn't gone how they hoped. But the reality is how much longer can the Japanese government pay 4 times what the U.S. are paying for electricity? To stay competitive in the manufacturing base, you need to have your electricity costs down. And even the president of Japan has said, we have to bring back our nukes. It's going to happen. It's just going to take longer than the investors in the uranium sector want. But the reality is Korea just took 8 down. They're bringing those back up. Japan is slowly going to bring their nukes up. And the rest of the world is going to be increasing. So next year, 2 new ones in China come on. The year after is 6. That's some significant growth there.
What does that do to the future of oil and natural gas, or are they just all separate?
No, you see, I wrote an article. I think that's a great question you bring up. It's not going to affect the oil market, but it will affect the LNG market. The biggest risk to the LNG market right now in the world is uranium. Now, why do I say that? 50% of all of the LNG in the world produced goes to 2 countries, Japan and South Korea. Japan consumes about a third to about 36% of the LNG produced in the world. Korea takes up another 12 to 14% depending on the month. So we know that the Japanese were similar to the Americans, where about 20% of electricity was nuclear. That came offline. They had to significantly increase their LNG, so they doubled their LNG production consumption, just like the Koreans did, because they brought their nukes down to check everything to be safe. And if the Japanese do bring back their nukes, do they need to pay $17 per MCF for that double of LNG consumption? No. So now, where will that other, 15% and another 8%, so that's a 25% of the global LNG demand, global, could disappear overnight if the Japanese put back their nuclear reactors.
What does that do to Christy Clark's dream of boosting BC's economy with LNG?
Well, look, the reality of what Christy Clark is saying is a lot of political lip service. I think she's doing the best she can, but LNG is not something that is going to affect our economy tomorrow. It takes many years to build these facilities, and all of these contracts are based on 20-year long-term contracts. And right now, the contracts that the Japanese are looking at would be fixing our price around $3 gas, and no one's biting for it yet. BC has to compete with the U.S., who can produce gas at par or even cheaper than Canada. Also, both the Canada and the U.S. are about 2 to 3 years behind the LNG global race with Australia, who's got the head start. Plus, remember, a general rule of thumb, 50% of your cost when you buy LNG is shipping, 50% is actually the gas. So for the Japanese or the Asians to buy LNG from Canada, say they buy the gas for $3, it would cost them about $3 to $4 to deliver. They'd be buying it for $6.50, $7 per MCF. Australia, it would be half the cost to ship and about the same to produce the gas. But the big question mark is what's going to happen with Qatar, who's the world's largest producer of LNG, and then other areas in the Middle East, such as Israel, where I've written many articles about what's going on there. And then the big wild card is the Russians. They already have 2 major producing LNG plants, and they're going to build 2 to 3 more on top of that. And never underestimate the Russians.
Yeah, well, they did that once with the space race, didn't they?
That's right.
We were lucky to beat them to the moon, I think.
It's a different game, though. Who do you want to bet on, Vladimir Putin or Obama?
In what, arm wrestling or anything?
Anything.
I think Mr. Putin's pretty much on the ball.
I agree with that. And the Russians have a lot of money. And if you look at what Rosneft is doing and Gazprom and the Russian firms, let's just say in the last 5 years, did you know that the Russians have now bought up or control almost 50% of the uranium deposits in the world? They control almost 40% of all the uranium refining in the world. The Russians produce 25% of all the gas that is consumed in Europe. If you look at the Russians, they have the largest natural gas reserves. If you look at conventional and unconventional sources, they have the largest uranium, oil, and gas resources in the world. Do not underestimate the Russians when it comes to the energy matrix.
Yeah, but they sure like to play hardball. I remember when they turned off the natural gas to the Ukraine during the middle of winter.
Well, the announcement just came out last night at midnight, which is, we're 8 hours behind the Europeans, but Ukraine just turned down the offer to enter the EU. What does that mean? Who won that race? It means that Ukraine is going to stay under the influence of Russia and has turned down the EU.
So politics plays a big role here in the energy market as well.
100% it does. And if you look at what the instability of what's going on in the Middle East, who's now positioned themselves better in the Middle East? The Russians. So all this meaning is the Americans need the Middle East oil less, and the countries that are at risk are Europe. What people don't realize is the Europeans have been benefiting from the American mandate to meddle in the Middle East. The trillions of dollars that the American military has spent in the Middle East, the Europeans have been a net benefactor for that oil. Now the Americans are pulling out because they've had success with their own shale oil and gas, so they don't depend on the Middle Eastern oil as much, and that makes the Europeans very vulnerable, hence why they're paying 2 times to 3 times for natural gas, which they get from the Russians, and they pay a premium for their oil from the Russians. So if you look at a country like Germany, where they get over 50% of their oil and gas from Russia, Italy around 70%, even the UK, who's made some of the world's largest onshore gas discoveries here recently with Quadrilla, they import over 25-30% from Russia. So Europe is addicted and dependent on expensive Russian oil and gas.
Do we have a possible market then for Canadian oil and gas there?
No. I'll tell you why. We would have to build pipelines the other way to the Atlantic, and on top of that, that's more infrastructure costs, more permitting delays, and it's just cheaper. We cannot compete with the Russian natural gas because the infrastructure is in place, and they can produce gas for less than $1 per MCF.
Well, Christy, what are you going to do now? Or I guess we'll worry about the next election. Has the business here, I'm told that Canada's oil and gas business is missing the boat, literally in some cases, because we just don't have enough pipelines to get stuff to where we can ship it out.
You know, I debated, when I just made my comeback, I took some time off for personal health reasons, but I came back in January of 2013, and I debated one of the founders of Greenpeace. It was a very well-viewed debate. Tens of thousands of people have watched it on YouTube. It's basically Marin Katusa versus Greenpeace. And I came up with something called the Casey Sensible Solution. And unfortunately, because of the events of Greenpeace and the First Nations and also the Canadian government, we are actually putting Canada and its citizens more at risk, and I'll explain why. By preventing new pipelines, we are depending on older pipelines, and more importantly, and on rail. So, 5 years ago, we had about 500 rail cars a day shipping oil. Very small. Today, it's at 14,000. Talk about growth. Now, on top of that, did you know that 15% of Canada's pipeline infrastructure was built when Elvis Presley was singing Blue Suede Shoes in 1958? Okay?
Yeah.
No one working in 1958 is still working today, but yet we expect and depend on these pipelines to be plugging away still. And that's 15% of our infrastructure. That's a risk. And instead of building new, modern pipelines with better technology, better materials, and better safety mechanisms built in place, and on top of that, we should be replacing this old, used, at-risk infrastructure and depend less on pipelines. And I said to the Greenpeace in that debate, which was at the end of January in 2013, you are setting our country up for a national disaster, and accidents by rail are 36 more times likely to cause a death than pipelines. And what happened in June in Quebec is just the beginning of what's going to happen. Shipping oil by rail is risky, and there's no need for it. If we build these pipelines, not only do we depend less on the shipping oil by rail, but we can replace for every mile or kilometer of new pipeline, let's replace old pipeline.
Is there a website people can go to find out what your point of view is on oil and gas and uranium?
For sure. You go to caseyresearch.com, that's C-A-S-E-Y, research.com, and you can read my stuff for free. Every Tuesday I write a whole blog on my thoughts, and on top of that you can try a free trial for 90 days. We're the only people in the business that do that, and it's 100% satisfaction guaranteed, or you get your money back, no questions asked. And we also have the top performance in the business since January 1st of 2012. Our audited numbers show over 50% realized gains in our portfolio. Now, in this resource sector where people are getting slaughtered, that's something I'm quite proud of.
Thanks again, Marin.
Always a pleasure.
Coming up, Tim Cyclesman Wood on This Week in Money.
Always consult your investment professional before making any investment decision.
More and more people are looking to the internet for intelligent, riveting, and thought-provoking interviews. To advertise on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com, call 604-699-8600, 604-699-8600.
This Week in Money is archived online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com.
My guest is Cyclesman Tim Wood, number 3 in Timer's Digest for your most popular and accurate predictions over the past year. Welcome to the show, Tim.
Hi, thanks for having me, Jim.
You were telling me before we went on air, we were setting ourselves up for something big. You're very nervous. Maybe tell us why you're nervous.
Well, Jim, I'm nervous for a couple of reasons. One, yes, people, my message has been, ever since the rally out of the 2009 low began, my message has been that this is a rally within the context of a longer-term secular bear market. I still basically believe that. And I think that label, people are not hearing the message, the entire message, because of that label. I think this is an absolute train wreck waiting to happen. I think that the things the Fed have done, just as I said with the rally coming out of the 02 low, I said that the longer that 4-year cycle advance stretch, the worse the outcome would be. And if you stand back and you think about something for just a little bit with just a little bit of common sense, we saw the liquidity infusion begin coming out of the 2002 low, and we did in fact see the worst financial collapse since the 30s that came from that. And then we had, coming out of the 2009 low, out of that collapse, we've seen what? More of the same. So why, on one hand, would we expect anything any different? But then you combine that with the poor technical, underlying technical picture, with declining issues, declining volume. Even something as simple as the RSI momentum divergences, not to mention the technical stuff with the cyclical counts, the Dow theory phasing, and I could go on and on and on and on about the long picture stuff. And yet, people have bought into this rally, and one thing that I said as the low in 2009 was made, I said the longer this rally goes, the more dangerous it will become. And this is exactly what I meant. Now, did I think that this rally would go on this long? Did I think that it would stretch into one of the longest 4-year cycle advances in history? Well, no, I didn't. But I also said that, there is a specific setup. I've gone back to 1896 and identified common denominators that have occurred at every major top and most every 4-year cycle top since 1896. And there's no reason to believe, based on sheer statistics, that we won't see that setup again. We have not seen that since the rally out of the low began. And what's kind of frustrating to me, and what makes this rally so dangerous, is that people, they're looking at price. Yes, the industrials is at an all-time high. I understand that. I get it. I see it. But it's not on solid ground. This is not a healthy rally. This is a liquidity-driven rally that is baseless, and it is a train wreck waiting to happen. And people, they have focused on a piece of my message. They have not heard that it's going to continue up until we get the setup. And so therefore, I guess people think, well, you're just bearish, you're sitting in front of a train. And like you said, whenever you introduced me, yes, Timer's Digest has me ranked number 3 for the last 12 months. And there's an article they're doing and coming out, I think, next month on that. So I'm not the perpetual bear here. Short term, yeah, it's going up, and I guess it's going to continue to go up until, like I said, we get the setup. But when that is in place, and I don't know if that's going to happen next month or 6 months from now or a year from now. I don't know, but I'll see it when it happens. I know what I'm looking for. What I'm trying to drive home to people is that this rally, the downside potential, the risk is far greater than I think 99% of the people understand. I think that most of the public has bought into this rally, and I'm telling our listeners, this is an absolute disaster waiting to happen. But until we get the setup, it's going to grind on, and and the further it goes, I think the worse it's going to be.
Do you think having Janet Yellen in charge of the Fed now is going to change the quantitative easing policy that I've been told by other people is partly responsible for this extended bull cycle?
Well, I think that I don't think it matters. I think who is there. I think that like I said, the rally From the technical perspective, we look at price and and in my case, I look at the cycles and the associated statistics. And it doesn't really matter what's driving price, but we know if we back up and we do look at the fundamentals. I mean, this thing, it's not based on this rally. Here's my bearishness. This rally is not based on new jobs. It's not based on a solid expanding economy. It's not based on there's some areas where the housing market is rebounding some. It's not based on manufacturing. It's not what's it based on? It's based on the Fed printing money and pumping it into the system. And why are they doing that? Because we have a crappy economy. If we didn't have a crappy economy, they wouldn't be doing what they're doing, right? So that's what I'm saying. This rally, it's all smoke and mirrors, and it will blow. And the setup will happen, and when it does, it's checkmate. And the potential is just absolutely enormous. I said that during the advance into the 2007 top, and it resulted in the worst financial collapse since the 30s, and I think this is going to be round 2 of that. I really do.
Is there anything a person can do to protect themselves from a downturn in the market like that?
Well, I guess there's a number of things people could do. They could not be in the market. They could be short the market. They could, move to cash. I think, from my perspective, people need to educate themselves, understand what's going on. And I don't want to sound like a salesman, but, I do have a research letter, like I said, ranked number 3 for the last 12 months with Timers Digest. That data is available. But I think one of the worst things people can do, and I know this is throwing stones a little bit, but it is a tremendous disservice, I think, to people to listen to that thing called a TV, because they are not going to say anything that's negative. They didn't warn us about the 2000 top. They didn't warn us about the 2007 top. They didn't warn us about the housing top, and they're not going to warn you about this one. And if anyone wants some statistical-based data, it's available through my service. If not, that's fine too. But I think once it cracks and the stage is set, like I said, it's the downside potential is just absolutely enormous, and the danger has been, people can see what they can see. It looks good. It's up. You see the cheerleading on TV. Everybody thinks the Fed's got their back. And I understand that, and it makes it very difficult to convince people of why this is such a fragile situation.
A financial advisor told me when they show the Dow Jones average every night, the cost of oil or gold on the news, here's the business news, they flash a bunch of numbers on the TV screen for a minute, and then it disappears. He says without analysis and knowing what those numbers mean, that's a disservice to the public. They go, oh, the Dow's down 50 points. Geez, there's a panic. They don't know what it means.
Right. And in a healthy market, the market goes up and it goes down. And the one point I think that you may be alluding to there is that a market needs to breathe. It needs to inhale and exhale. And statistically, it's not my bias. It's not a matter of opinion. It's a matter of fact. Statistically, the longer a 4-year cycle stretches, the worse the decline into the 4-year cycle low. This thing is stretched. It's stretching. It's approaching the longest to be one of the longest 4-year cycle, top 3 longest 4-year cycle advances in history, and it could stretch to be the longest. It would almost make sense that it would in the environment that we're in, and history clearly shows us that once the exhale begins, or the inhale, however you want to look at it, like I said, it's not a good thing. And there's going to be a lot of innocent people that don't understand because they're listening to that TV, and there's going to be a lot of people hurt, just like there was in 2007. I remember seeing the pain firsthand. A lot of people were in the way on that one.
But you were saying that people haven't been listening to all of your message. I mean, that's the negative side. What's the positive?
Well, the positive side has been that, and I guess maybe maybe it's my fault. Maybe I have the negative side overshadow the positive side. But the positive side has been that, it's going to continue up until we get the setup. And as of right now, I can't say that we have the setup. But we're so far along, and here I go overshadowing the positive side, but right now we're so far along in this thing that I'm awfully nervous. I mean, I'd be dancing close to the door if I was still in the market. But, that has been the positive side. That, I have yet to call a top, and I think this is getting pretty frothy, but I've yet to call the top.
Do you think you'll have advance notice that you'll see the warning signs that this thing's about to peak and then avalanche?
Yes, I think so. Every setup is a little different. People have asked me the question. In 2000, I called that one. It was in print. It was in a magazine article, and that one set up 18 months. I saw the setup, and then it was 18 months before it really cracked hard and become obvious. So there was time with that one. At the 2007 top, there was a little less time. It was a matter of just a couple of months. But yes, it was identified at the top, and I see no reason, depending on exactly how it sets up, there should be advance warning that I will give to my subscribers. How much, it depends on the setup, and I'm not going to know that until we see exactly how. And when I say the setup, what I'm talking about is the structure of the cycles. They will indicate, they will kind of telegraph this. And, we don't know how that's going to set up until we see it.
Tim, how do you, I was going to say, how do you subscribe? How can people get in contact with you or find out what your thoughts are?
Cyclesman.net. They can sign up there online. And like I said, the one thing I want to warn people about on the letter, I hear this routinely, is that it takes, people want to, I think what they want is something simple. It says, buy here, sell this, buy that, do this. My letter is not that. It is a research-based, statistical, technical letter, and it takes a little bit of effort and a little bit of time to understand it. But once people do, I've got subscribers that they tell me, they said, I don't care what you charge, I'm in. But then there's others, they look at it and they go, I don't know what the hell he's talking about, and they don't get it. It takes a little time, it takes a little effort to understand it, but it works. Read the testimonials, not number 3, for no reason.
Tim, always a pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you, Jim, and I look forward to doing it again.
After the break, Robert Campbell on This Week in Money.
Blue Christmas, the king of tributes, Randy Elvis Frisky and his spectacular show band, Christmas classics, rock and holiday favorites, and the gospel music of Elvis Presley. Saturday, December 7th, Abbotsford Pentecostal Assembly. Tickets at ontourtickets.com.
This Week in Money is archived online at talkdigitalnetwork.com.
My guest is Robert Campbell, author of the bestseller Timing the Real Estate Market. Welcome to the show, Bob.
Thank you.
Well, we're always worried about some bubble or another, and I hear that in certain markets, the real estate bubble is sitting there boiling. For some reason, housing prices keep going up, and yet a lot of people are saying this is just not sustainable, just like it was before the big crash a few years ago.
That's true. It isn't sustainable. Most booms aren't sustainable, and that's why they come crashing down. But we're not there yet. I would say so short run trend is still up, and when I say short run, I'm saying within the next 6 to 12 months, I see no severe problems ahead. After that, we keep of course watching the data, and I think that's probably when trouble's going to come again.
I mean, surveys in Canada show people still really want to own a hunk of something, a hunk of real estate, whether it's a pie-in-the-sky condo or a nice little country acreage, but we're still really into owning parts of the country. We want to own real estate, but is that a good ambition?
Well, what I tell my clients and followers is this, that we all, it goes without saying that we all need a place to live in. Buy a home. I mean, for your own, peace of mind and psychological well-being, we all need a place. So if you can afford a home, buy a home. But make sure that you can afford it. Live within your means. And so, I always like that aspect of holding onto that. However, when it comes to investment property, I really believe that people should, for the most part, follow the cycles and get in early when the trends start up, and then get out at at or near the top before the trends before the trends start taking prices lower. So, yeah, in certain aspects, I think real estate could be, a real solid investment, for the average individual. But as far as speculating it, just like speculating in the other markets, the stock markets and bond markets and, commodities, you got to watch the trends.
Is it any help for Vancouver that 50,000 people a year move into the Lower Mainland? Would that guarantee the prices stay at least steady or moderately?
Well, it's sure a big help. It's sure it's sure putting demand pressure on prices, of course. And I don't know how quickly you guys are building homes in the Vancouver area to supply that demand, but that's certainly part of the equation. And what you have to look at, and speaking of the United States, that's for the same reason that we're still doing quite well right now. Demand is still expanding, just like it is, in Vancouver. Sales, existing home sales nationwide are up like 8 or 9% year over year, and the supply of homes is down at based on that existing home sales metric. Supply of homes is down around 5 months. In other words, at the existing pace of sales, it takes 5 months to sell all the homes. Well, 5 months is about 15% below the long-term norm, which is about 6 months. So you've got that supply and demand, those fundamental metrics working for you here in the United States, just like they probably are in Vancouver right now. So until that changes, you got to be looking for, property appreciation.
Laneway housing has been approved in Vancouver, where you can convert your garage into a house or, build something.
That's because it's so friggin' expensive. It'll probably be like you convert your house into a duplex with the garage is one legal unit now, right?
Well, what a lot of people plan to do is, retired folks, they don't have the kids anymore, so they're going to go live in the Laneway house and rent out the main house.
They're going to live in the garage?
Well, it's not
and
a
rent
garage.
out the main house?
Yeah. Well, you should see the designs for these Laneway houses, though. I mean, they're cute little deals. It doesn't look like a garage.
Yeah. I've seen some of those, and I've looked at those. Some of those modular homes that are simple to build. I mean, some of these things that, that you guys aren't there yet, because you guys are still experiencing an economic expansion. At least your housing market has stayed levitated a lot better than the world markets, real estate markets have. So you guys are still doing well. But I just got back from Europe for my first time, and we were in Italy, which I loved. I'll tell you, where we're going here in the United States, and where you're probably going to follow, is we're going to a lower standard of living. Smaller houses, smaller cars, motor scooters. So, unless you can buck the global trend, that's where I think the United States is going, just like Italy and France and it's not bad. It's not a bad way to live. So you talk about smaller house, trying to trade down. I think that's definitely, going to happen. And, whether, Vancouver will probably be the last one to, for that to happen to, but that could easily happen everywhere in the world.
Although surveys in Canada found that most people who own a home, they say when they retire, they don't plan to move unless, they're hauled off in a stretcher.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's the same here in the United States. That people talk about, okay, what I've always said is like people in California, which is the highest price housing statewide in the United States, I said, for financial reasons, going to a lower standard, they're going to be forced to sell their $300,000 or $400,000 median priced home in California and move to Kansas, where they can replace it for $150,000, and they'll free up, $250,000 of capital to live on until they die, maybe. But the point you make is this, that they don't plan to move. Most people don't move. They don't move. They don't move away from friends and family. They stay put. You're absolutely correct.
Well, there's been a study that connects home ownership and joblessness because people don't want to move. Once they get that nice little place set up, I'm not moving halfway across the country.
Well, that's where their friends are. That's where their family is, too. Everybody most families kind of stay together, You don't want to move away from your family. Unless some families you probably
I was going to say, you can't get far enough.
Yeah, are there any vacancies in the North Pole?
Yeah, I find it interesting that my cousin's son, she lives in Halifax on the East Coast. He came to university here in the West Coast.
Who are we talking about?
Oh, my cousin.
Oh, okay.
Her son. He had to go all the way across the country,
Exactly.
just to get away from mom.
Right.
Well, we'll talk more about mobility and real estate right after this. More with Robert Campbell next on This Week in Money.
More and more people are looking to the internet for intelligent, riveting, and thought-provoking interviews. To advertise on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com, call 604-699-8600, 604-699-8600. This Week in Money is archived online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com.
Welcome back. We're chatting with Robert Campbell, author of the bestseller Timing the Real Estate Market. During the break, I asked you, is there any place in the world where the real estate market is stable and you don't have to worry about things going up and down all the time?
Yeah, and I told you it was Kansas. and afterwards I thought about it a little more, and I said, and also Oklahoma, which suffered a big decline during the early 80s because of the oil bust. When Texas went down, that essentially Oklahoma hasn't recovered it, either, and it's been kind of just everything's stayed kind of flat, for a long time. And of course, but that's and I would say, there's a lot of places around that are like that, where things tend to be, tend to go craziest is in the big cities, along the coastlines, and for some reason, where you get these people with a more of a speculative mentality, as far as, making money, and they of course drive the prices up to a point where it can't hold, and then it comes crashing down, like, California, San Diego, Los Angeles, San Francisco. Same as on the East Coast, Miami, New York, Boston. So, very stable. Hey, I'll tell you something interesting too while we're talking about the United States, and I'll just leave this up because you're asking about the States, is that, I'm sure all the listeners are familiar with what's going on in Detroit. The population has dropped from like 2 million to 800,000 in the last 20 or 30 years, that's never happened before in a major city. That also, interestingly, where the population is falling is Chicago, Illinois.
Well, Toronto now has surpassed Chicago as the third biggest city in North America.
Wow. So, I mean, that, and in talking about these things, I think the most, one of the things that I hope everybody understands is that, in my view, you're better off taking the view that there's nothing safe. Nothing's safe. Nothing's immune from the laws of markets, and that you've got to be on your toes nowadays. You can't get complacent, and I don't care where you're at, you should be watching the trends. If doing well in the markets and surviving financially is a high priority for you.
Well, Canada did not have the mortgage crisis the U.S. did in the recession, simply because Canadian banks always have been very tough. Any kind of loan. If you want 10 cents, you better have $50 worth of equity to back it up.
Well, that's the way it ought to be. See, I didn't know that. I'm not familiar with your banking, but that's the way it ought to be. Hey, when I started speculating in real estate back in the 70s and 80s when I got my start, I'm 66 years old right now, to buy a piece of investment property, these are the old days, old school. You had to put 25% down.
Same deal here, 20%.
Exactly. And that's how you stay out of trouble, where people have skin in the game. And it just doesn't turn into games of high finance and high leverage. That's what's destroying the United States, and that's what's destroying the world. It's these banksters who are just using, leverage and loans and things like that, to their own advantage, where everybody else ends up holding the bag. When the music stops.
Well, I saw one of those infomercials where they said how to buy real expensive real estate with no money down. And their plan was, okay, you have a mansion. All you have to legally do is pay the interest. It's like just paying the minimum payment on your credit card. In other words, these people weren't really buying a house. They were leasing it.
Right.
And so the banks,
that by itself, nothing's ever good or bad without putting it in context. If you get the timing right, when you do that, you can make a lot of money. But that, that all of a sudden, when that kind of leverage goes against you, I mean, you can make a lot of money fast. Okay, when the trends are with you. When the trends start going against you, which they eventually will, you can lose a lot of money fast. I mean, maybe you don't have, or if you don't have any skin in the game, I guess you're not going to lose any money. The banks will lose money. The banks will get a bailout, and then who gets stuck with the bill?
We all do.
Exactly. So, I mean, gee, nobody lost anything. Right. We're all paying the price. And we're all still paying the price. Hey, how's the economy, as far as classes of people up there, how's the middle class holding out in Canada?
It's like the U.S., pretty hard pressed.
Really?
Yes.
So the financial elite keep getting richer, and the rest of us slobs just kind of barely hanging on?
Well, we have to pay income tax. Rich people find all the loopholes. In fact, they built the loopholes.
Right.
Yeah.
But see, here in the United States, we've always prided ourselves and had a strong middle class with the American dream of work hard and you'll get ahead. Hey, that dream now, even though they keep ramming it down our throats, there's a lot of smart people going, hey, that dream don't exist anymore because I'm working my butt off, and I'm falling behind. And it's because, of all the leverage, all the debt. When before we start talking about bubbles. Where's the next big bubble? Is it in real estate? And the biggest bubble in the history of the world, that's the debt bubble we're in right now. That's the one that's going to cause that's what's going to cause the big problems, in solving that. So these real estate bubbles, stock market bubbles, whatever they are, that's small potatoes compared to this debt bubble worldwide that's being built up, all around the world, because there's no way in heck that's ever going to be paid off in real dollars, in real money.
I guess Canada's unique in the world. Our federal government says it'll have a surplus by next year.
See, you guys run things so much better than the rest of the world. My only concern for you is you're going to get caught in the jet wash.
Oh, we always do.
Well, who isn't going to get caught in it, right? So, I mean, it's not saying you guys can sit there like little fat cats going, well, we mind our own business. Hey, when the world, when the global economies, all take a hit one way or another, either through inflation, deflation, or both, everybody in the world's going to feel it, especially that you won't feel it as badly, if you've watched your lending more carefully than the rest of the world has, and it appears that you have, but you're still going to feel it. And so you should still have your guard up, to defense against that.
Well, every time you trust politicians to do the right thing, I think you're already fooling yourself.
Oh, you can't. Oh, great point. What I tell my followers is, don't trust politicians and don't try to save the system. Save yourself. We're way beyond political solutions at this period of time. Here in the United States, because, who gets the votes is the people getting the economic free lunches, right?
Exactly.
Well, if you look at the federal, state, and all the welfare and government subsidy handout programs that we have, there's 36% more households getting a government subsidy, in other words, taking, than are actually putting into the system. So do you think there's any chance of us, of those people voting for austerity and to stop this nonsense? No. So we're beyond a political solution in my view. Now you've just starting to think and act independently for yourself, get off your butt and do something, and just hope and pray that you're in the right asset classes at the right time, whichever way this thing ends up going. But I think that there is no fix for this at this point in time, and everybody with a functioning brain knows it. So, but even you Canadians up there that have been, living within your means, a lot better than the rest of the world has, you guys are going to feel it.
Oh, we do every time.
So I mean, so that's what I call, and I caution, and I'm not singling out Canadians. I mean, it's just saying that even prudent people, even if you can just hang on to what you got when this thing, resets globally, you'll be better off than, probably 95% of all people. So that's the encouragement.
Bob, is there a website people can go to check out your latest findings?
Sure. It's realestatetiming.com.
And as they say,
realestatetiming.com.
And they say timing is everything.
That's what my dad always told me. And finally, I figured out, how to put it into play, how to use it, and not just talk about it.
Thanks a lot for chatting with us.
Oh, my pleasure. Enjoyed it a lot. Bye.
Thanks to our guests, Marin Katusa, Tim Wood, and Robert Campbell. And thank you for listening. I'm Jim Goddard for Phil Mackesy. We're back next week with more This Week in Money.
This Week in Money is a production of Howe Street Media Incorporated.